Hey everyone, how are you? So today is day 19 of the video challenge. And today I want to talk about the importance of relinquishing control, and trusting in the unseen. And the reason why this is important, or why it's important to me. For me, I am a professed control freak. And because I, have troubles with, trusting the universe sometimes. And when you don't have that trust or that faith, you end up causing yourself a lot of undue suffering. And so, in order to have peace in our lives, we have to relinquish control and learn to trust. And that's been really hard for me because I am a concrete thinker. And I feel, when I think about the things in my life, I'm a problem solver. And, I would like to think that, the situations that have unfolded on my life is purely because of me. But that would be pretty narcissistic to think that. But what I've learned is that I can actually have a lot more peace in my life and enjoyment and joy if I learn to relinquish that control and actually really believe in something that's bigger than I. And I think that, when I say that, I guess I should preface this as a pretty spiritual talk versus a healthcare talk, is that for me, trusting in something that's greater than I believe in creator, so more of an Aboriginal spiritual tone. But whether you call that God or whether you call that universal energy, or whatever faith that you believe in, I think they're really, for me, all in the same, except they just have a different title. And for me, that gives me a lot of peace, knowing that there's something bigger than me that has a greater plan for me. And that provides me a lot of comfort and peace, knowing that I'm exactly where I need to be. Obviously, being a healthcare provider and a scientist, I like to see before I believe, right? And that's really ingrained in our society, is that if we don't see it, we don't believe that it's true. And over the last few years, I've always been drawn to alternative therapies and alternative things. And so I've really incorporated a lot of practices into my life that help me be reassured by my intuition, because a lot of times I didn't hear it because I was coming from a position of fear and such bad anxiety, I couldn't really even connect with myself. But I also, really was coming from a point where I wouldn't believe it unless I saw it. And so I needed to have that validation. So there was things that I did and tried out, and still do, to kind of reassure me that my intuition is right, that my gut instinct is right. But also looking to the universe and looking to the world around us for clues and comfort. And I do that in a few ways. One of the ways that I do that is I use oracle cards sometimes. And so I'm in my office, so I don't have my oracle cards, but I'll post a picture of them. And maybe what I'll do is I'll actually pull a few cards, and I will ask you to choose one of them, and I'll send you the reading off of the back. So I do oracle cards, and the most common, if you're not familiar with what an oracle card would be, is tarot. So most people are familiar with tarot, but there's multiple types of card decks for a variety of things. And so really, pulling those cards and reading them is a really great way to kind of connect with sometimes the inner turmoil that's going on us, or to reassure us the direction that's going, or as a reminder to do self-care, or just awareness of, a checkpoint that we're working through. The other thing that I like to do is numerology. I find numerology really interesting. And so, June happens to be the 6th month, which happens to be the halfway point in the 12th month calendar. And 6 in numerology is meant to be about balance, balancing our inner and our outer aspects, which really makes sense because, as we come through spring is about, growth and new beginnings. And so it's really interesting to look at June as a time that we kind of set intentions, and people usually are reinvigorated in the spring, and they're making plans for the rest of the year, and they're cultivating that, right? Whether it's your garden, you're cultivating that to see where that progresses in the fall to get the fruits of your labor. And so from a spiritual aspect, June is a really great month to be able to think about and set intentions and goals of things that you want to accomplish and cultivate. And then you see that into fruition, usually in the fall, those intentions that you've set. The other thing I'd look at is the full moon cycles. And the reason why I do that is because, working in Emerge, and if you talk to any healthcare provider, mostly nurses, will say that definitely we see differences in people's behavior around the full moon. Specifically, if you work in an ER, for us that work in long-term care, we notice changes in our patients around the full moon. No, it isn't studied or documented, but we all agree that something changes in people. And I noticed the change in myself. This weekend was a new moon, and this particular calendar year, new moons have been a stronger force for a lot of people, changing kind of their, changing them up a bit than the full moons have been. Usually it's a full moon that makes a bigger difference. But what I noticed in myself and really in my daughter is my daughter doesn't sleep around these new moons. So it was interesting. It didn't even occur to me that it was a full moon this weekend. And I picked my daughter up from her school on Friday, and she was cranky, which is really unusual for her. She didn't even want to go for ice cream, which is crazy. And then she had really poor sleep over the weekend. And so I was looking at the moon cycle and noticed that it was a new moon. And that made a lot of sense. And the reason why that's comforting for me is that it allows me to have better compassion and an understanding versus getting irritable and wanting to kind of control or change the outcome. Is just accepting what it is, right? And that is really freeing for many of us. The other thing that I like is astrology, not because I feel like it's, a prescription, but it gives me a heads up, right? It gives me a heads up on, if Mercury is in retrograde, it gives me a heads up about maybe I'll have problems with communication, or it gives me a heads up about what's going on. The same thing with the moon cycles. Each moon has a different name in the Aboriginal tradition and means different things. And certainly the moon in June, I can't remember what the Aboriginal folk call it. If it's the strawberry moon, maybe. Anyways, it means different things. And so it kind of is a theme for the month. And so it's really interesting to kind of incorporate those things as just, as a way to kind of accept and go with the flow a little bit better. The other thing that I like to do, and this might be weird for people, but I like to do look at the meaning of angelic numbers. So for me, I really believe in, the spiritual beings, angels, whatever you want to call them, and them communicating to us. And so for me, looking at different numbers, so the most common thing that people will see is on their clock, they might see 1111, right? That's really the angelic realm giving us a message. And for me, the angelic realms gives me messages in the night. So when I'm having a very poor sleep where I'm tossing and turning, I look at my clock and I write down the number. And last night I was up at 1:13. So I went and Googled the angelic meaning of 113, and I'll put the website of the person that I like to look at. And what it told me is that, that I'm in a real big change in my life right now. that there's going to be a lot of upheaval, but that it's necessary for me to learn a particular lesson so that I can really step into my unfolding path and really live my my purpose. And that really struck home to me, because right now I'm doing a lot of work on creating a business plan and actualizing a business plan, and coming to a lot of realizations around that, having to make certain sacrifices in my life if realistically I'm going to see that through. And basically 113 meant that my spirit guides are around me. They're there to support me and to provide me comfort if I need it. And so that was really quite comforting to me, considering I was kind of a bit tossing and turning through the night. So looking at numbers, so some people see them kind of on license plates. Some people, see the clock. But if you're ever interested, put in a Google search angelic meeting of a certain number. The other thing is just really looking for signs in the environment. I think that we live a very fast-paced life. We rush through, and we actually don't even notice the beauty of the world that's around us. We don't see the vibrancy of the green grass, or the vibrancy of the greenery now that it's spring, because we're just in our heads, and we're consumed with our to-do list and not really even appreciating the ordinary. And I think when we can appreciate the ordinary and see it as extraordinary, there's a lot of peace there, but there's also a lot of messages. So looking for hearts in nature, looking for feathers, feathers and coins, specifically pennies, or another kind of communication from angels saying that they're there and they support you. So looking for that, being more present and in the moment, I think releases and relinquishes a lot of control. Certainly when I'm in that state of being really trusting and knowing that I'm exactly where I need to be, then, I'm able to flow through life. I'm able to surf, right? The world gives us, waves, and we need to learn how to surf. But when I get into my head and I try to manage it, or I try to push it away or be fearful of it, then I cause undue suffering. And at the end of the day, I really believe that the life doesn't give you more than what you can handle. And I think any of us would agree with that, in the sense that when we look on our lives, we've all had a multitude of experiences, and we've always made it through. We're strong enough. We've been able to do it. Yes, it's been uncomfortable. Yes, it's painful at times, but we've come through the other end stronger with greater knowledge. So I really do believe that we're put on this earth with a certain path that's sort of predetermined. Certainly our humanness gets in the way of that, and can make our journey more difficult. And so then we end up having to learn these lessons multiple times before we get it or experience the same things. Or sometimes, the universe kind of shakes us up, or creator shakes us up a bit and says, hey, well, you're way off path. You need to kind of steer. And I feel like that's happened in my life. My fire, for example, or my burnout were, major pivot points to get me back on track. But yeah, I'm not saying as humans we don't have choice, and that we don't, that we can sit on the couch and our life is going to be wonderful. Certainly we have